I'm going.
Okay. First thing you're going to do the day you go to the DMV is your COLA test. That stands for cut out low air. Okay, this is the only thing you have to be perfect on. You can't miss a step on that brake test. First portion of the test is governor cut out. What you want to emphasize there is that my governor has to cut out no higher than 130 psi. Okay, right now our primary gauge, which is the top one, secondaries on the bottom, are both well past 100. My primary's at 110, my secondary looks to be about 105. So I'm going to fan the brakes down to about 90. That way when I start the engine, we'll be sure the needles rise. So I'm going to start the engine, increase my RPMs. My governor has to cut out no higher than 130. Okay, our needles are rising. Now, when we reach governor cutout, the needles will stabilize and normally you'll hear a hiss of air.
You're giving it a little gas, yeah?
Yeah.
That
Bring it up to about 1,500 RPM.
And that speeds up the pumps, taking up the air.
Okay, that flush of air indicates we've reached governor cutout. I'm going to give a reading of my primary gauge. It's about 122. My secondary is at 120, so that's a good test. It did not exceed 130 psi. Okay, the next portion of the test is governor cut in. That's when the governor tells the compressor to start pumping air. What you want to emphasize there is that your governor has to cut in no lower than 85. So it's 130 on the high side, 85 on the low side. So what I'm going to do is fan my brakes down in what they call 5 to 10 pound increments. All that is a good pump of the brake pedal. Then I'm going to wait 10 seconds between each pump of the brake. When my needles start to rise, I'll give the inspector a reading. I'm going to wait 10 seconds. Okay, my needles haven't risen. I'll hit it again. Wait 10 seconds. Still not rising. Hit it again. Wait 10 seconds. Okay, they still haven't risen. I'll hit it one more time. Okay, my needles are starting to rise. My primary at 100, my secondary at 99. So that's a good test. It did not fall below 85. Now we're going to do what they call max air prevent rollaway. This really isn't a test, but it's something you have to do in order to perform the last two portions of the COLA test. So I'm going to bring my air back up to max, which we know is right about 120, 122 on our gauges.
You bring it up till you hear the flush of air again.
Okay, I'm going to put the tranny in the lowest gear, shut my engine off, release my clutch now. It's important. I'm going to release the tractor and the trailer brake. I'm going to push both plungers in. So the only thing that's stopping us from rolling is the fact it's in the lowest gear. Okay, now we're going to wait for our needles to stabilize. Next test we're going to perform is the 460 applied static test. What you want to emphasize there is we're checking for leaks in the system. That's why my brakes are released. There's air flowing all the way to the trailer. So what we're going to do here is apply moderate pressure to the brake pedal. You're going to give the inspector a reading of your primary and your secondary gauges. Then you're going to hold the pedal down for 60 seconds. Within that 60-second period, you cannot lose more than 4 psi. So I'm going to apply moderate pressure. My primary is at 120. My secondary looks to be right about 102. I'm going to wait 60 seconds. I can't lose more than 4 psi. Okay, Ben, for the sake of time, let's say 60 seconds has gone by. There you go, you hold it the full 60. Okay, 60 seconds has transpired. Before I lift my foot, I'm going to give a second reading. My primary is still at 120, my secondary is still at 102. That's a good test. I did not lose more than 4 psi. Now I remove my foot. Don't lift your foot until you give the second reading, because then it changes the air pressure. Okay. The last portion of the brake test is your low air warning light or buzzer. That's a light and a buzzer that comes on if you're out on the road and you're losing air in the system somewhere. Gives you enough time to get over to the side of the road. So I'm going to turn the ignition to the on position. Okay, that beeping there is my oil water warning light and buzzer. It's got nothing to do with my braking system. So now I'm just going to fan the brakes down. I'm going to look on the dash for another light, listen for another buzzer. Okay, there's my light, there's my other buzzer. My primary gauge looks to be right about 72, my secondary right on 70. So that's a good test. Did not fall below 55 psi. Remember, that light has to come on no higher than 75, no lower than 55. Okay, I'm going to reapply my brakes, start my engine up, build my air pressure back up to about 100. I'm going to perform a tug test. We're just going to test each individual brake on the tractor. Okay, put the tranny in the lowest gear. First brake I'm going to check is my tractor parking brake. I'm going to release the trailer, let my clutch out until I feel some resistance. My trailer brake is holding. I'm going to apply, tractor brake is holding. I'm going to apply the trailer, release the tractor, let my clutch out. My trailer brake is holding. I'm going to pull down on my trolley arm, release both brakes, let the clutch out. My trolley brake is holding. Release the trolley, put my foot in the service brake. My service brake is holding. Put the tranny in neutral, set my brakes, shut the engine off. Now we're going to start our in-cab inspection. First thing I'm going to look at is my mirrors on my driver's side, passenger side. Make sure the mirrors are mounted properly, the brackets aren't cracked or damaged. My mirrors aren't excessively dirty. They're adjusted to my specifications. From there, I'm going to look at the windshield. Just make sure it's got a good rubber seal around the windshield. There's no indications of any leaks. I'm going to make sure there's no unauthorized stickers or decals that would obstruct my vision. No cracks larger than 2 inches. That thing's okay. It's not larger than 2 inches. I'm going to look at my wiper blades themselves. Make sure I've got a complete set. They're not cracked or damaged, and they appear to be mounted flush against the windshield itself. Now I'm going to come over to my steering wheel, turn it from side to side, no more than 2 inches of free play on a 20-inch steering wheel. I'm going to tell the inspector I check my city horn and my country air horn. From there, I'm going to check my left turn signal, right turn signal, my 4-way flashers. I'm going to turn the key to the on position, turn on my windshield wipers, check my wiper washers. Come on. Don't feel like working. That's okay. Make sure they're getting a good clean sweep. From there, just turn my fan on. I'm going to tell them I check my heater defroster. I'm going to turn the ignition on, turn my headlights on, check my high beam, low beam, my panel lights. Okay, from there, we're going to get into our gauges. Our temperature gauge, water temp gauge, operating range on that is 170 to 200, no higher than 210. Oil pressure, about 30 to 70 psi. My amp or voltmeter on this tractor, the operating range is 12 to 15 or within the grain. You don't have to mention your fuel gauge. We already checked out our air gauges. Okay, from there, just going to point behind the passenger seat. Those are my reflective triangles. I got 3 of them. They're in good condition in case of a breakdown. From there, I'm going to come up to my shifter. Make sure my shifting arm's not cracked or damaged. The shifting crown's secure. My splitter shifts in both ranges and it's not leaking from the airline. I'm going to make sure my rubber boots securely mounted to the floorboard. It's not cracked or damaged to where fumes would be emitted into the cab. I'm going to stick my hand between the driver's seat and the door. This is my fire extinguisher. I'd make sure it's fully charged and up to date. Next thing I'm going to do is just check my seat belt, make sure it fastens and unfastens properly. It's not frayed or damaged. I already mentioned my horn, city horn, country horn, in case I didn't. When you're at the steering wheel and you check that free play, go to your horns. I'm going to tap my clutch, no more than 2 inches of free play on your clutch. The last thing I'm going to check is my fuse box. Just stick my left hand under the dash. This is my fuse box. I carry extra fuses in case I had to replace any. That's the whole in-cab right there.
Alright.
That's the in-cab and the brake test.
Rolling. I'm recording, so can you hold that?
Okay, first thing you're going to do before we pop the hood is just look at your trailer marker lights at the top. Make sure the lenses aren't cracked or damaged. They're amber in color. They're working properly. Check your trailer marker lights. Make sure they're amber in color, not cracked or damaged, working properly. Then look at your headlights. Make sure they're working. They're in proper adjustment. Same thing with your turn signal lenses. Amber, not cracked or damaged, working properly. Then look at your grill and into your radiator. Make sure there's no debris like cardboard or newspaper between the radiator and your grill that would cause a problem with your cooling system. Then make sure your bumper's on there nice and tight and that your bumper's not bent into your steering axle, which would inhibit your ability to steer. Got a California license plate, up-to-date tag. Now we're just going to step back, look under the front of the tractor. We're looking for excessive leaking. Engine oil, power steering fluid, radiator fluid. Now we're going to pop the hood. Okay, this is a tractor we take to the DMV. So I always start on my reservoir, my radiator reservoir side. Okay, you're going to tell them that's my radiator reservoir, that's my PEEP site, that's where I add radiator fluid if necessary. I'm going to check my adjoining radiator hoses and my heater hoses. With any hose which you want to emphasize that it's properly mounted at both ends, my hoses are not cut, cracked, or leaking. From there, I'm going to point over to this portion of the engine towards the center. That's my water pump. I'd make sure all the bolts are in place. My water pump's not leaking. From there, we're going to come over to our water pump and our alternator belts. We're going to make sure they're in proper alignment with a pulley. The belts aren't cracked or damaged, excessively worn, and they do not have more than 3/4 inch of free play from the center. I'm going to come over to our alternator, make sure the bolts are in place. It's an electronic device, so I'm looking for any indications of any frayed or shorting wires on my alternator that would cause a problem with my charging system. I'm going to point in to the back of the engine compartment. That's my shock absorber. I'm going to make sure the rubber bushings are in place. My shock absorber is properly mounted. It's not leaking. Going to come over to our frame. What you're going to emphasize on the frame is it's a chrome moly frame. You can't weld it. It changes the tensile strength of the metal. So what we're looking for there is any unauthorized or illegal welds, any cracks in the frame, any illegal drill marks. Those are factory drill holes. Those are okay. Now we're going to come over to our spring mounts, front and rear. Make sure all the nuts and bolts are in place. Spring mount's not cracked or damaged, it's not welded. It's going to come down to your leaf springs. Make sure you've got a complete set. Your U-bolts are in place. Okay, on your steering axle, you can have 25% of the springs missing or damaged and still drive the vehicle. I would